Hi guys, today we're going to work on building a hero that has some synchronized transitions that uses no frameworks, no external utilities to do so. So there's no GSAP, there's no motion page, there's no anything apart from pure CSS and a couple of utility classes. And what I'm going to do is show you how to create this simply. I'm going to use fixed units to do this, so I don't have to rely on a framework. And later on, so what I'll do is probably a second follow-up to this video of showing how you can convert this to using frameworks, particularly a CSS variable framework, which is a lot better in my view, gives you a lot more control over the site, keeping it consistent. But I don't know what frameworks you have or don't have, or what knowledge you have, so I'm going to keep it really simple for this demonstration. So looking at what we have here, we have a very simple hero. We've got a background image that's darkened. We've got a block of text that's got a heading, accent heading, some lead text, and a couple of buttons. That's slightly rotated to the right, and it's slightly transparent. We've got an image of a girl on the right-hand side there, which has a 3D rotation with the left bottom corner coming out towards you. And these are all going to transition when I hover anywhere over that hero. So I'm going to show you now. If I hover, you watch the left-hand side, it rotates back to the left, so to zero rotation, and it becomes fully opaque. The right-hand side, the 3D rotation swaps over, and it comes out towards you, looking like it's actually coming out of the screen towards you. Okay, so that is what we're going to build, and I'm going to show you how to keep this consistent across your animations or your transitions using some very simple utility classes. Okay, now I will head over to the back of that and have a look at what we've got. So here's our structure. We've basically got a section, we've got a background image which we're going to use an overlay. I'll rename these because that's not a good name for it. We've also got an overlay on that. We've got a wrapper with a grid. So the wrapper is actually a container. We've got a grid inside that with two cells. The left cell contains some content. The right cell contains our image. And in the content, we've got a header, body and footer, so we can easily manipulate that. So for example, I could push that footer to the bottom just by setting the top of that to be auto, the margin top of that to be auto. So, and inside that we've got some content, we've got some buttons. Very simple sort of a layout. Okay, so I'm going to head over to our vanilla install and show you how to build this without needing any additional plugins. Okay, so I've got a local site here for the demo using WP Reset, and I set this up to my base starting point for demos so that I can reset it back to the snapshot when I'm finished, which is exactly what I've done. If we have a look at the plugin set for this, it's pretty limited. We've got Bricks 1.9.4 installed. These are not being used for this demo. I'm not using CodeBox. I'll use that in the second part of this tutorial, showing you how to use it as a framework. Let's just obviously reset. This just gets royalty-free images off the internet, create some fake posts. This one here, one of my all-time favorite plugins now, is a add-on for Bricks Builder, which gives you a hell of a lot of productivity features. There is nothing you can do with Advanced Theme that you can't do manually in Bricks, but this just makes it a lot easier, makes your life easier, much more pleasant to build with Bricks. So I will use this to speed things up, but you don't need it to do what I'm doing here. Okay. So let's start. So the pages, we're going to do a new page. I'm just going to call this maybe just simply Hero 1. Hero 1, there we go. Get Bricks. And in here, if I have a look at my settings, this is my default settings, theme styles, my conditions for the entire site. All I've got is general, just set my background color to this dark color. And I'm just going to use the default Bricks colors for this demo because I don't know what you've got. I don't know how you've created your colors. So to follow along, just use the default palette that comes with Bricks. And then on the section here, I've set a 10 rem top and bottom and 1 rem left and right margin, padding, sorry, not margin. Again, your framework you use might deal with this automatically, or if you're creating your own variables, you might use variables in here. But for this, I don't know what you've got, so I'm just going to use fixed units here. Okay, so you'll see on the right-hand side of my structure panel, you see all these shortcuts here. That's Advanced Thema, or AT. That gives you all these, and that's basically a bunch of the common stuff you'd find on the left-hand panel here, all these elements. Much easier when you've got this right next to the structure panel, and I'll show you that as I start creating. All right, so what do we need? We need a section. It's got a wrapper. It's actually a container I've called a wrapper. And then we've got the image and a block in there. So let's show you how you do that. So your section, there's your Hero 1 section. There's your wrapper. Get back to the hero, and we want a block, and we want an image. How simple is that? Rather than going back through, searching on the left-hand side, pressing the plus, you just click on these down the right-hand side. Once you start using these, you wonder how you ever did it without them. Okay, so we're going to call this our overlay block. I'm going to call this our overlay image. Okay, so that's done. Inside our wrapper, what do we got? We've got a grid. Inside that grid, we have 2 cells, and they're both blocks. So let's create a grid. Inside that, we'll create 2 more blocks. That's grid. Cell 1. Cell 2. Okay, in cell 1, we've got a content block, which you probably don't need, but I'll put that in there. And then we've got a header, body, and footer. So in cell 1, we're going to content block, we go header, body, footer. Okay, and then we've got inside our header, we've got a heading and an accent heading. So header, we've got heading and an accent heading, which is just a box. Call this accent. Heading. In our body, I think we just got a lead. Just going to put a box in there, call that a lead, a text box, I should say. In our footer, we've got a button wrapper, which is a div, and then we've got 2 buttons. So I'm going to add in my footer, I'm going to add a div. So then we're going to add 2 buttons. Buttons, and then button and button alt. Okay, in cell 2, what do we got? We've got a perspective wrapper, which is a block, and an image, which I'll call featured image. Feature image, so I'm going to put a block there. So the block is an image, feature image, perspective wrapper. And we'll call this feature image. All right, there's our structure done. Now, here's one of my favorite features of AT. I use BEM, or block element modifier class naming, for everything I do. It just absolutely made sense as soon as I started to use it and understand it. Here's how you create all of your elements in AT. Right click at the top level, class converter, create classes. All created. So I'm going to zoom in on my left-hand panel here. Now I've got Hero 1 at the top there. I've got Hero 1 underscore overlay block. So it looked at the name of this element that I named it, and it put the underscore converted to lowercase and put the dash in the middle there, and that's my BEM element name, is a overlay block. This is my Hero 1 overlay image. Hero 1 wrapper. How cool is that? How long does that just save me rather than having to go and create classes for every single one of those? Beautiful, right? Okay, so there's my structure done. There's my class names done. Let's have a look at my section hero. My section hero at the top, I've got a utility class called hasOverlayChildren. And that's because I'm using these 2 elements underneath, which I want to stretch to fill the space of that as an overlay. So it's simply, what we have to do is create a class called, I'll just call it hasOverlay. And for that class there, all it's a utility class. And all I need on that is to go to my layouts and set my position to relative, because I've absolute children underneath it. I'm going to set my isolation to isolate. What that does is it means that that point there is my lowest possible z-index for any of its sub elements or children underneath it. So if any of these elements have a negative z-index, they still sit on top of that one there. That is the lowest point. So a negative 1 million z-index on this overlay block still sits on top of that hero, because that isolation isolate says that is the lowest point. Okay, and that stops the negative z-indexes from disappearing behind other content. So that's what that's for. Okay, and that's all we need on the top section. You're going to put a little hint on there. So I'm going to put some CSS on there. So I'll call that, add the CSS there. You don't add this before you run your class converter, otherwise it'll add that to the block name. Okay, so what else have we got? The BG image. These are not, doesn't matter what order these in. We've got a utility class called overlay image, right? And that's the CSS for it. I'm going to copy and paste that. I'll make this whole template available so that you don't have to try and remember all this and type it out, but I'll just copy and paste this to speed things along. So this is how I actually just put it in the same order. Okay, so I'm going to call this my overlay image. And why am I using utility classes? Because I will use this in multiple blocks. I'm not going to use this only for this hero one. So use it as a utility so you can use it in multiple places. All right, my CSS, paste that in there. Now there is one thing I'm going to do here that I hadn't done previously. When I add my images, I'm adding them as a figure. So that puts a figure and then it puts the image element inside the figure. And the reason we do that is we're going to scale that image. We don't want it to go outside of the box, so we can set the overflow to hidden on the figure and then scale the image inside it without it causing any overflow issues. So that's the reason I use, even though it's an overlay, I use the figure for that. Okay, so what I tend to do is grab that root and go image. So the image inside of it, we want to set the object fit to cover. Show you why when we actually select the image. Actually, let's select an image now. So I go to the content, select an image, and let's say we pick, well, maybe this forest here as our background image. And you see it's not squashed. To have that not squashed when it's fitting into a space, we'd have to set this object fit here. But we don't have to remember to do that. So what we do is on the overlay image, because we always want it to be not squashed on the overlay image, you can set that on the actual class there. Now if I comment that out, see now it's squashed. So we just set it here and then we don't have to remember to do it when we add the image. So all for additional images, all we do is add an image, add the overlay image class to it, select the image. That's it. All right. So our overlay block, let's have a look at that. The overlay block has a utility called BG overlay block, and that is the CSS for that. Overlay block. So we're going to create one called overlay block. We're going to put that there. We might actually darken that a little bit. Let's make that 66 so you can see that it's like an overlay darken image. This is all we need for this because we're going to transform this using another utility which keeps everything in sync. We'll come back to once we've got all our structure there. Okay, now the next thing we'll do is our grid. So we've got a hero one grid here. We're going to tell it it's a grid. We're going to tell it we want 3 rem gap and we want 1 FR. Again, we'll do this with a framework properly later. That gives us a 2-column grid with a 3 rem space. We'll go to our content here. Let's set the default color for our text to be the whites. Go to the accent here. We'll say accent heading. Okay, now here's our accent heading here. I would say our accent heading is probably going to be the same on multiple blocks. So let's create a utility called accent heading, or heading dash dash. So heading is our block modifier. Whoops, our modifier is accent. Okay, and on that we're going to set our color to be maybe this blue here, and we're going to set everything to uppercase, line height of 1, and maybe we'll put a 3 gap in there. So we get that typical kind of accent heading type thing there. Make it 700 so it's nice and bold. And there's our accent heading done. Now also in this content block, we probably want some padding or spacing. So I'm going to go hero 1 content, and we're going to add some row gap of maybe 2. So some spacing between the elements. Okay. Buttons. The rest of this we'll just leave it as it is. Actually, not the lead. We'll change the lead. Set the color of the lead to be this yellow. On our buttons, we're going to change that to be a flex and set a row gap or column gap, sorry, of 1 rem. Just give some spacing in our buttons. With our buttons themselves, we'll make the actual buttons. We'll put a link on them. Secondary. Okay, so we've got 2 buttons in our buttons wrapper here. Okay. We're getting there, aren't we? We're getting there. Now, pick our feature image. Select the image. Let's do that girl again. She looked quite good, didn't she? The girl. Now, on our feature image here, we'll make sure we got a class selected. We're going to set this to whatever you want. You can set your aspect ratio to 1, so it's a square. Tell it to cover so it doesn't squash it. I've got by default, this is a figure with no caption. Okay, on the style, we're going to go to our borders and put a border on it of 2 pixels, solid, and maybe use this light gray here, and we'll put a radius on it of 3 rem. Okay, and you can see our image is actually escaping outside of our border. And that's because we've got an image inside the figure tag. So what we have to do on our figure tag is in the layout, we need to set the overflow to hidden. There we go, overflow hidden. All right, we're getting there. Now, we also want to rotate this in 3D. So this perspective container above it, we need to give that perspective. So we're going to create a class here on the, we're going to add to the perspective wrapper, and we're going to do capital R tab, and AT gives us this shortcut to getting a root with the curly brackets. I'm going to put the perspective of, let's say you make it 800 pixels. Okay, that's going to help with our 3D rotations. So we've got a perspective wrapper, we've got a feature image, we've got everything set up ready to go. And now we need to just start looking at how we're going to transition everything. So at the moment, if I look at that, we've got our lame-o look. Okay, let's just, one other thing I'll do here, maybe I'll center that content in the cell. So cell 1, and let's just center the content. So it's in the center there, all right? Now, one other thing that is making this really, really easy to do is you'll notice on, let's have a look at this cell 1, for example. Actually look at the overlay first. So the overlay, I've got a utility class here, which is the main thing that keeps everything in sync for your transitions. This is the cool part that I wanted to really get to. So here it is here. And again, I will make this available. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to my new one there, go to my overlay block. I'm going to create my utility. I'm just going to call it transform. Transform utility, that'll do. And in my CSS, I'm just going to paste all that in there. And see, it did nothing apart from ruin our background here. okay? And that's because it's applying this background, which is not set correctly yet. Oops, let me just expand that out a little bit. Okay, so what do we got here? My background is set to initial, which is overriding my default that I set on my overlay block, okay? And that is because the reason I did that is that when we use it on buttons, it will override the background color on the buttons unless we do this. So if you add your utility class, you need to set your background externally from that. So how do we do that? Let's have a look at the hero one here, and we go R, tab, and what we want to look at is the way these are named is it'll be the hero one. Oops, I'm on the wrong class here. The roots go there. That's something you've got to keep watching out for, Bricks. Make sure you're on the right class when you do this. The way it names it is the block. So in this case, it'll be hero-1 __ and then lowercase overlay hyphen block. So all we have to do to target that is do our root placeholder __ overlay dash block. Okay, and that's going to target this element here. Okay, now what do we need to do on that? Let's have a look at the overlay. In our transform utility, we've got a background variable. So grab that. So if we go background, and we're going to just do hex RGBA, so we're just going to do 00000077. Okay, and we've got our background now being controlled by that variable. Now, how do we get this to transition when we hover over the hero? Simple. R, tab gives us our root, and we want to do is hover or focus within. So it is hover or focus within, and then we want to target the overlay block, and we want to set our background to the same, but let's make it CC. See that transition? All we've done is set a background color, and when we're hovering over our hero, target the block and set the background color. What that's doing is it's changing on this transform utility. It's changing that background. Okay, so even though we're not targeting transform utility, we're targeting hero1 __ overlay block, it still overrides that variable. Okay, so it's a cool thing about this. This is so easy to do to keep it really consistent across the whole thing. Now if we have a look, what we got is overlay done. Overlay done. What if we tab to the button? Is that tab working? Tab to the button, the overlay works. Tab to the button, overlay dims. I'm just using the tab key. Or roll over, it does the same thing. Okay. Now, background image. What are we going to do with our background image? We're doing nothing with the background image. We've got cell 1 is rotated off to the side, isn't it? So let's have a look at the whole rotation of that. So come back to our builder here that we're working on. We're going to get cell 1 or content, whatever we want to do it on. So let's do it on the whole cell. And we're going to do R. Whoops, on the wrong thing. We go back to the top level, which is the hero. Hero 1, make sure we're on there. Capital R, tab. Again, that's an AT feature. Otherwise, you got to type out %root %space curly brackets. Okay, so we're going to target the cell 1. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to set the transform utility. Let's have a look at that transform again. Actually, we haven't added the transform utility to it. We're going to add the transform utility. So add the transform utility to that cell. And if we have a look at the transform utility, we've got a transform variable. So come back to our hero. So we're going to set our transform of rotate maybe 4 degrees. Okay, well, that's a big rotation. That's too much. Maybe 3 degrees. And we're going to set the translate X to, maybe we'll make that 30 pixels. So there we go. So it pushes it to the right. So it's transforming it by rotating it and pushing it to the right. Okay, what about the opacity? So the variables are the same name as what you'll find with the CSS properties, just to keep it simple. So let's set the opacity to 0.4. In the builder, we're not going to see that opacity change because if we look at the transform utility, the opacity is only being applied if we're in the bricks front end. That's so we don't, if we have something with an opacity of 0, we can still see it and edit it in the editor. Okay. All right, so we got opacity at 0.4. Now we're going to use the same selector for when our root is hovered or focused within. And then we're going to target our cell 1. What are we going to do here? Grab these two variables. Okay, and we're going to transform that to 1. So it's on hover or focus, and we're going to set our transform to none. Okay, look at the front end. Look at that. So we've got the background and the cell all transitioning using exactly the same timing, just by using a couple of variables that we're overriding. All right. Now, what else is animating? Let's have a look at the image. So with the image, I'm going to take some guesses here from what I did previously. Here we go. So let's go back to our hero 1. Let's target root __ feature image. Okay, and we're going to set our transform to rotate rotate X. Let's make it 5 degrees. Let's make it a bit bigger. So let's say 8 degrees. And rotate Y by 8 degrees. And you see it hasn't done anything yet. Why is that? Because we haven't applied our transform utility. Let's go to our feature image. Our transform utility. Now look at it. It's rotated. So it's rotated the same as the other one, right? So let's make it even more. Let's say we're at 12 degrees. Okay. So that really sticks out, right? Or we can go to our feature wrapper and make that less of a number. Let's make it say 500. So we got more of a 3D rotation, yeah? Make it 600. If we don't have much rotation, let's make it 1,000. Make it 1,000, so it's only a slight rotation. I kind of like it around 800 for that one. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to grab our rule for when we're focused or hovered. We're then going to target our feature image. And we're going to override these to be minus 12 degrees and minus 12 degrees. Look at that. We're swapping. Okay. What about scale? How about we do scale of 0.9 and we'll do a scale here of 1.1. Look at that. Coming out towards you now. There we go. So we're getting there, right? Look at that. 1, 2, 3. Right, all within the same timing, same everything. We can change this. Let's say we want this girl here to rotate quicker than the rest of it. What we do there is we have a look at our feature image here, have a look at that transform utility. On the transform utility, we've got a transform duration. So if I grab that transform duration variable, come back to my hero, look at my CSS, here's my feature image. What if we change that to be 0.3 seconds? All right. Just put an S on there. Okay. Now we've got the girl coming in really quickly and the rest of this at a slower rate. So all we got to do is override a couple of variables. How brilliant is that? Okay, now we had another effect we had here, which is a little bit trickier. Now on that, this one here, just having a look at how I did that last one. Let me just check that back again. I think what we did is on the content. Yes, on each of those. So we've got a utility class here, which I'm going to copy and paste. And let's go to the cell one's content, because that's the wrapper for our header and body and footer. So on the content, we're going to add another utility class, which is our transform. Transform utility. Trying to keep the naming the same. I'm going to do dash dash stagger. Okay, so this is like a stagger modifier for it. Okay, I'm going to add that, and on there, it's going to paste this in here. What that's doing is it's changing our delay step for, the transition delay for all of the direct children, and it's multiplying that by each iteration of the children. So, the first child doesn't get any delay. The second child gets the delay step times, it gets the delay step. The third child gets the delay step times 2. And just changing this transition delay property here, right? So we've added a utility to do that now. Now we're going to go to each of these and say, what do we actually want to happen? And we're going to create another little utility on here. So we're going to put the transform utility on each of these. Transform utility. So we've all got the transform utility on all 3 of those. We've got the stagger children modifier on the content here. And then we've got the transform utility on each of these here. Now what we're going to do is create a modifier for the transform utility. Just going to grab that name, and I'm going to call that a move dash dash move up. Okay, so transform utility move up. What are we going to do on that? I'm going to grab our transforms utility. We're just going to override the transform. What we're doing here, a transform of so we'll start it from being lower. So I'm going to go translates. Is this going to work? Translate y by maybe 10 pixels. I don't know. Just trying to think how I've done the other one. So let me have a look at it. Sorry. I've got the transform utility, stagger children. It's just staggering the children. And then on the transform here, no, sorry, because it's a child. We're going to have to do it from the arrow section. Cell 1. There we go. I had to do it from the section here. So Where are we getting that from? Cell 1, contents, header, body, footer. Whoa, buttons. Sorry, I did it on the actual. There we go. Because we're going to do it on the block, we need to grab. That's it. That's right. Had me thinking for a second then. So we need the stagger children there. We don't need a move up utility because we want to stagger the children. Sorry. Problem is you work on too many of these things at once and you forget how you've done them. So we've got our stagger children on our content here. We're going to add this rule here to translate by Y, and when we're hovering, to translate the focus back up again. There we go. All right, so here we go. So I've got where we pretty much started where hover, and I've got my girl here hovering, spinning in at twice the speed of the rest of the stuff. Got my background darkening. I've got my left here moving. If I hover over that, I get a stagger in the way these things animate. And it all comes down to this utility class, or two utility classes here. One is the transform utility, this one here. A transform utility is having all of the defaults that we can override as variables. And then with the cell here, the content that's on that cell, we've got a transform stagger, and it's just overriding this transition delay, which you find in the transform utility here as a transition delay. So by having that stagger multiplying out each nth child, that alters that transition delay on each one of these children. And that keeps it really, really consistent. So the next stage from this would be to not use fixed variables. And I would say instead of using values like these colors here, these numbers, I would say move that into a framework. And then it's a lot easier to keep this consistent across your entire website. So that's pretty much it. I hope that makes sense. Look, let me know if you want anything explained a little bit further, or go into a bit more depth on anything. But hopefully that will help you in keeping these transitions nice and consistent. Thanks for listening.